Don't boil me! I'm still alive! Iraq lobster! Iraq lobster?
Today, lobster is a ubiquitous commodity considered one of the most luxurious delicacies that money can buy. When one goes to a fine dining restaurant, oftentimes the most expensive item on the menu will be lobster. But this elevated status of lobster has not always existed. On the contrary, in fact, lobster was once considered trash food acceptable only for prisoners and the poor, a fertilizer and a widely regarded spam of its time. What happened to the lobster that changed its meaning to symbolize luxury and wealth? It was the expansion of railroads across the United States between 1880 and 1950 that caused this change. The meaning lobsters own today did not exist in the mid-19th century when the industry was born. In 1876, John J. Rowan, a famous naval officer, wrote, "Lobster shells about a house are looked upon as signs of poverty and degradation." Even the word lobster comes from the Old English lop, meaning spider. Lobster could be found in the canned goods aisle in supermarkets alongside Spam, and was so cheap that it sold for 11 cents per pound compared to baked beans at 53 cents per pound. So how did lobster become associated with images of poverty and disgust? The answer lies in the supply of this commodity. Initially, lobsters were abundant. In 1622, Governor William Bradford of the Plymouth Plantation apologized to a new arrival of settlers that the only dish he could present their friends with was a lobster, without bread or anything else but a cup of water. In the early years of the industry, 20-pound lobsters were so common that lowly 2-pounders were thrown overboard. During the 1840s, the industry began to expand, and lobsters were almost exclusively sold as canned goods. The combination of how lobster was served, thanks to the canneries in Maine, and excess supply were the two key factors that gave lobster this downgraded perception. Back then, anyone could get lobster, but no one wanted such a form of canned meat.
It was only until around 1880 that certain external developments began to occur that would change the meaning of lobster forever. The most influential factor was the railway boom of the 1880s. From 1870 to 1880, the number of U.S. railways lines doubled, with the majority of new railroads interlinking states and delving deeper into rural America. As railway trips got longer, passengers needed to be fed, and as a result, by the early 1880s, dining cars began appearing. Initially, dining cars were simple places to eat that had been picked up en route, but they quickly developed into fully staffed restaurants in which meals were cooked and prepared. Now, savvy transportation managers saw an opportunity because railways started to spread across America. Since no one knew what lobster was, they could market it to passengers as a delicious, rare, and exotic meal, even though it was very cheap for rail companies to procure. Since passengers, many of them from inland states in the Midwest, had never heard of, much tried lobster before, they had no idea that on the East Coast lobster was considered trash food and were instantly hooked. This popularity was compounded by the fact that it projected the romance of the travel story. Eating lobster that was caught off the coast in Maine on a trip inland to Chicago was glamorous, to say the least. Additionally, this railroad growth made lobster available in places that it previously was not. As explained by culinary historian and consultant Lou Greenstein of North Reading, Massachusetts, as the Industrial Revolution got underway and railroads were built, the capacity existed for perishable foods, like lobster, to be packed in ice and transported from the point of origin to inland places like Chicago. While the expansion of the railroad rebranded the perception of lobster into a highly desired luxurious delicacy, it also played a practical purpose. The expanded train network allowed live lobster to be transported instantly across long distances. This allowed for the change from canned to live cooking.
Displaying lobsters alive in tanks at restaurants and supermarkets has the effect of guaranteeing freshness, but also offers the customer an experience of personally selecting their own meal. As Diane Tai writes in Cuisine, the Journal of Canadian Food Cultures, the transformation of lobster into a valued commodity came with the growth of the live lobster market in the 1950s. Live lobster sales rapidly replaced the canneries and opened up lucrative Canadian and American markets. By the 1950s, lobster had become the delicacy we know today. As an article from the Pacific Standard points out, lobster was something movie stars ate when they went out to dinner. It was the sort of thing girls from new rich families ordered for their weddings, something the Rockefellers served at their parties. Today, lobster stands as one of the finest foods money can buy. Red Lobster, Luke's Lobster, and the infamous pod lobster roll are all staples of modern lobster consumption. As David Foster Wallace, author of Consider the Lobster, writes, Lobster is posh, a delicacy only a step or two down from caviar. Interestingly, the taste has never been a major factor in lobster's claim to fame. Sure, the canned meat of the 19th century was not as appetizing as the fresh lobster tails one buys today, but overall the flavor, texture, and color of the meat has never been consequential. What the change in meaning of lobster goes to show is that the experience of a commodity can be more important than its inherent qualities. A lobster of the 1800s and a lobster of today would taste exactly the same, but their meaning behind eating such a lobster could not be more different.